Welcome everybody to join us in this How to Succeed with E-commerce webinar. I am Mirka from Fluido's marketing team and will be here today assisting my colleague Antti with this show. But before we begin, a quick look on the agenda for today. So first, quick introductions, then Fluido in short, then moving into the actual topic. So what is e-commerce, how to create e-commerce strategy, what is the value of e-commerce for sales, and how Salesforce and Fluido can help. And we are sure to save some time at the end for questions from the audience, which you can type in throughout the whole show in the questions dialog box to your right. So we will pick up the questions from there at the end. But without further ado, please, Antti, go ahead.
All right. Hello and welcome to the session. Really excited to talk about e-commerce and the journey we've had and together with our customers and some of the insights that we've learned, and especially trying to pull that into context of something valuable, where to especially start and how to really think about it. My name is, as said, Antti Katajamäki, and I run the digital experience and e-commerce practice at Fluido. And we have many experts in this domain working in ongoing projects and projects that we've done, and we are talking about with our customers of the next big things as well. But all sorts of commerce cases on our belt already, and then really looking forward to sharing those insights and also the questions at the end. And just a little bit of Fluido, if Fluido is not known, and especially around the commerce. So we are a leading Salesforce partner in Europe. We can help our customers from the very beginning, so from the discoveries and the designs and concepting all the way to successful deliveries. And we focus on Salesforce technology, but of course, typically these projects involve more than Salesforce. So this is typically a big effort, of course. We have many people that are certified in this domain and have a lot of experience in both creating digital experiences and commerce on Salesforce, both B2C and B2B and everything in between. We are doing global e-commerce projects and really specific projects for our customers that may have some complexity due to the way that they operate or some really specific value elements that they are chasing. So a lot of good insights and experience of all kinds of projects, and this helps us to engage with our customers that come from many backgrounds, because of course, as you learned today, e-commerce is not necessarily all that simple. We are also a member of the Salesforce Experience Cloud Global Advisory Board, and the meaning behind Experience Cloud for e-commerce is that many of our projects are actually the storefront is running on Experience Cloud, but we've also done on other technologies as well, the storefront. But it's really important that the storefront technology is fully known and what are the capabilities of it. But really, this is the recipe. So this is actually all we need to cover. But I'll go into more detail. But there are 3 domains that you definitely need to look into to be successful in e-commerce. Of course, there are ways to begin sort of simple, but really to have it on a strategic level, which is the point of today. I want to highlight what you need to handle. So as you see to the left, the strategic approach has a whole lot more. Then in the middle, you see the balanced e-commerce. So it's not only technology, for example. So I'll have a look at that. And then you need to understand what is the role of e-commerce in this bigger chain of events at your company. So these 3 domains, there are more, of course, but I want to focus on these today. So what is e-commerce? This is subjective at times as well, but I try to bring a little bit of objectivity to it as well. But here are some myths about e-commerce. So for example, for B2B, the myth number one, most B2B companies don't offer e-commerce. So that's completely wrong. So many companies do, and across any industry, and this is increasing significantly. So you all heard the story around how COVID changed the digitalization. So that of course reached all the way to B2B and the way our customers are actually, how they want themselves to be served. And B2B buyers definitely not only prefer the face-to-face interactions, so that remains, but really a lot of there's a lot of movement towards the digital channels when given a choice. And this is specifically if the concept works and it is of value, you can really handle this. And is it enough just to have a basic e-commerce site? Yes, maybe in the beginning, but the really forerunners are looking into they treat e-commerce as a full service channel, and they are investing significantly to it. But this is of course when we think of it strategically. And e-commerce is definitely not for your small purchases anymore. So of course it is definitely moving for any type of purchase at this moment. Then e-commerce is, it's many things. Here are some thoughts that when e-commerce is actually part of the discussion, but it's not really said. So it is, if there are discussions to improve the self-service offerings, or we need to increase the order accuracy, or we want the customers to manage their accounts, all of this means actually also e-commerce, so it's related to it. So pay attention when discussing in your companies that what is actually, could this be resolved, or could e-commerce be part of helping out on really specific things? So it definitely serves for the full customer journey, or it has a role of direct or indirectly connecting to these elements. So just some thoughts on the table. So perhaps you've heard of these in the over the coffee at the company, or some challenges that the business has identified that maybe could be solved with e-commerce. But the beef really is to look into strategy on e-commerce. So this is not it. So this is e-commerce at its simplest. This is perhaps the major misconception of e-commerce. So this is, yes, one part of e-commerce, or can be. Actually, not even all of the stages that are presented here are as such part of our customers' e-commerce journey. But this is your sort of typical view that you perhaps as a B2C customer also identify, that you have a site of some kind where you have the products available, you can browse, you can search them, and once you find an interesting product, you view the details, and if you're still interested, maybe you put it in a cart, and hopefully finally making an order. But this is, as said, it is some of the core functions, some core capabilities of e-commerce, but it's definitely, with this you can only get a mere start. But just wanted to really highlight that yes, this exists as well. But when we think of e-commerce strategically, which is when you can really tap into the value that it can generate for the business and for your customers and partners. So you need to look at it from a different view, or perhaps in a bird's eye view, and understand first of all, okay, what is your vision as a company, the strategy, the goals, and of course those typically tend to change these days, especially quite in a fast pace. But that is the root. So e-commerce cannot sort of be a separate part of that. It has to be interconnected to it. It has to somehow make value of that, or be an actionable element of the company's vision. And so you're really looking into the concept. But what is that concept? That is, of course, something that needs to be really researched. So I have a point of view to that as well, that how do you actually create that? And you need to define your goals. Perhaps they are sort of high level at first, but the more you can create them, those goals into something that you can track, something that you can measure, then you bring some meaningfulness for the team, and it aligns with those goals, and you can really see if you are getting towards those goals as well. But this is something that that takes a bit of thinking, that how would you actually do it, and how can you measure it as well. So as said, you can have vague goals, but you should also have really tangible KPIs. Otherwise, it's just another e-commerce site. Then when we move towards the middle with the customer experience and so forth, so of course the whole CX, UX, UI, that must be in place. If you have a fantastic concept, but the experience in all simplicity sucks, nobody is going to use it. So we are all a bit lazy. We all know that if you have a great experience and it flows nicely, it has trust elements to it, it has all the information for you to make the final decision, you move forward and you use the tools. So really that is the, I don't know if the single most important thing, but it is a significant success element of e-commerce. But rightly so, if you have fantastic experience for your customers, then the next challenge is to make sure that your internal team, internal processes, the employee experience of people who are either directly or indirectly connected to the self-service e-commerce experience, then this is the place where you need to work a lot and make sure that you just don't have a surface experience that has no connectivity to the company. And the real value elements are typically actually found within this space. But if I say customer experience, also remember the employees, they are critical, and the different stakeholders. I'll go into this element a bit more, the detailed staging from different companies, how e-commerce is actually part of the bigger picture. So that is really, really essential to map the role of it. Once you have your solution set up, of course, to capture the KPIs and also to understand the details, how people are using. So of course, data is important, and not just your transactional data that, hey, there's an order or here's a product, but it's also the engagement data. And this is perhaps the future actually of e-commerce overall, that we really understand how the solution is used, and then we can harness that for the future actions and the engagement towards the customer. Perhaps one of the really critical things often forgotten is the management of all of this. And this is where Salesforce typically steps in and is really great at, when the solution on Salesforce platform is inside of it, it's decoupled, but it's close to each other. So it's easy to manage. And not only that, here's the UI, but also the business processes related to it. And as said, when you look at the value, it's definitely the value elements for the customer. Those have to be meaningful, and that it takes a lot of understanding of your customers and their elements that need to be looked into. I'll discuss briefly this in a bit, but also the value towards business. Something that I'd like to highlight of e-commerce once it really starts rolling, that not only look into revenue, but really look into the profits of that channel, but also how it relates to other, if you think of sales in omni-channel way, then what are the profits of this channel? And also if it has certain cost impact. So as said, just back here, simple view, strategic view. So really a big difference, not all that complex, but it's good to take into account the full picture. Certain strategic objectives, I've really wanted to keep this simple. as elements to identify for the audience that what are the actual objectives. That are you going for growing in new business, or are you upselling for the existing customers, or are you actually lowering the cost of sales? Typically, I would say that most likely it actually has a bit of this all on the roadmap, but it typically starts from somewhere. That do you have a completely new product that you want to launch to a new market, or new product to an existing market, or perhaps you're moving into service business, you have subscription business coming up. Will you have some new categories available for the existing customers? So perhaps you have an installed base towards your customer, and based on that you begin to recommend elements for your customers. Or is it actually that you want to get to the long tail of customers? And this is quite often something that we see that companies are identifying, that hey, we really need to get in here. There's so much of our customers, but we cannot engage with them in our sort of manual sales efforts. So we need to figure out another way. But really think of where you are now and how do you want to do this tomorrow. Really busy slide, don't need to read all, but this is just an idea of how to slice and dice once you have the strategy, once you have your concept, once you have your use cases and solution elements. So this is just one way to sort of identify that you cannot do everything at once, or perhaps you have something existing. So really think of the scope elements of what it takes to actually build them, and what is the value of it. And this is just sort of simplified view to it, but I think it gives a nice perspective. And then finally, not to sort of fool yourself, it's really good to identify the KPIs to track in those stages. But it's especially fantastic to slice and dice always, otherwise the program becomes too big at once. So really identify the steps that are meaningful, and also think of the first step as that it must bring value already. This is also typical that we see that the first phase is so low in ambition that you launch it and then your market says that, okay, that makes no sense, I don't want to use it. But then in next stage you have something fantastic coming to the customer, but you already lost the trust from the audience. So it's balance, but definitely it's good to slice and dice your plan. And of course, this evolves typically over time, but there has to be a beginning always. If we look at the role of e-commerce more in sales as a general view, so first of all, to master this whole space, and I'll come to the business bit here, that if we just look at the technology, it's gonna fail for sure. So it's not that we can say that, hey, just get Salesforce and it's gonna work for you. So this is one piece of the puzzle. It is a critical piece, and in that, when we look at it, you need to keep in mind certain things, because the e-commerce journey overall tends to be sort of forever, and it has a lot of connections to it. So something that we highlight a lot, and we take a lot of pride in understanding the composability and the scalability of the solution, but also the agility to make movement and test things. Something also that I hold very dear is the business empowerment. So the technology cannot be so complicated the business is put on the sidelines and they need to shout out that, hey, we would want to have this, and hey, we changed our process, you need to change your e-commerce, and then the stack is just too complicated to do anything. So at best, the business is close to the solution and the processes are close and you can adjust things, but they are still decoupled. We see, of course, connectivity becoming critical. So due to the order fulfillments and the product data and whatnot, and personalization, of course, I had another session around the personalization and the future of digital experiences. So this is something that maybe you want to tap in something around Genie. Mobility and all the sort of future immersive solutions. So e-commerce, sort of your portal is just one piece of the puzzle. So you really need to think that how are the customers actually buying? That do they, come for their laptops or their mobile or app, or is it actually something that is just sort of natural part of their daily life? And how do you actually connect e-commerce to that? So of course, there's a lot of sort of future in that, but you need to get started again. But that's the technology. That's sort of the, how would I say, the easy part, because the really interesting domain is to understand, of course, your business that I talked earlier, the goals, the strategy, what are the opportunities and challenges going forward, the processes, the sort of everyday life of your business. This is actually something that typically we see that even the understanding of that is sometimes could be perhaps more detailed in order to understand the actual opportunities and challenges. But then this mystical bubble of humans that we all are, so this definitely needs research and understanding. And your users are not just your customers, or it is your partners, your employees, the full value chain typically. So of course you have some typical things that you would do here to map the journeys and so forth, but something that we see is that the experience silos tend to increase once you sort of think that, hey, let's do e-commerce here, let's do our websites here, let's do our portals here, let's do our apps there. So how do you keep that in line? Is it same technology, or is it somehow otherwise handled? And definitely focus on the customer experience, so the value towards the customer themselves overall, but then also the user experience, so when they're actually using the solutions. So these three domains need to be handled, and these concepts need to be typically researched in order to really capture the essence for the e-commerce strategy. And the role is definitely changing of e-commerce and self-service overall. So perhaps in the past, and perhaps where you begin is sort of, your long tail and simple products. But then of course, many of the companies, their products can be very complex and they have significant range in their customers, especially in B2B. So this is for sure changing. So e-commerce self-service capabilities and the demand from the market is increasing. So it's definitely coming to the full domain for the most complex of products, the most important of orders, and of course the most important customers. But what happens to sales? That you typically, especially we're focusing on those most important customers and the complex products. So they'll remain for sure, but their role is just changing, and perhaps for the better, so they can more focus on the customers' engagement and the cooperation and the planning, and not just sort of be the team that takes those orders in. So this evolves and it leaves a path to change the way the sales is engaging. And of course, self-service doesn't mean that your customer is able to necessarily do everything. So quite often it actually happens that in self-service you collect your need, and then the sales team collaborates with you to actually finalize the piece. But of course, this world is quite different for each of the companies. I've listed here use cases around e-commerce, and I want to sort of look into a few of these in detail as well to give you a feel what they actually mean. But just to give you an idea, from the simplest of use cases towards the more extreme or more complex, but doable still. So of course we have our world of, in B2B especially, rapid reordering is really critical functionality, or then that the sales or service team is helping the customer to finalize their orders. So these are more straightforward. On that note, I have to say that each of these can be also complex, but just on a theme, typically they are on the simplest side. And this is your sort of typical commerce here. So straightforward, you have your products, maybe some recommendations, you're able to put things in a cart and make an order and pay it and see the shipment data and whatnot. Marketplace is also here, but this can be also extremely complex. But as a simple, if you have a multi-vendor e-commerce with seller management and products, so Salesforce has really great product in this space to get you started. But of course, this whole concept can be taken quite far. Then we have our subscription products. I actually have one screenshot of one that we are currently working with Salesforce subscription management. So around the revenue cloud from Salesforce, so connected that to Salesforce Commerce. Then guided selling. So of this I have an example. And then of course the beast here that everyone enjoys, the configurable products. So if it goes really far, so I would almost, and I've stated here that excluding the engineered to order products, but also this is something that we are discussing with some of our customers and some of the methods that you could actually bring in that space. But then one of my favorites recently due to one of our customers is the contract-based orders, so and the e-procurement capabilities. So let's look at this in detail as well. But just to give you a landscape of e-commerce use cases on a high level. But that guided selling that was mapped there, so here's just an example of that, how it can feel, and just to give you an understanding of it, that this is also e-commerce. It's just one method inside e-commerce, or the only one. So depending, you could have multiple ways. For some customers, it's enough that they find the product, they know exactly what they're looking for. But some customers, like in this case, they just understand perhaps what they have, of what they are going to use the product for. So this is just an example where you define your use case, you define the details. In this case, if you choose a hammer option, that you select the details of the actual hammer. So in this case, then you would get the suggestion of products that actually fit for it. You can throw those in a cart and request a quote or make an order and whatnot. But this is an example of guided selling that can be built on Salesforce as well. And here's an example on the contracted volume-based buying, or some elements of it. And I understand that these can be quite different for different companies, but just to give you an idea how it sort of maps to that general flow of steps. So you have of course, your marketing awareness and interest in creating leads towards having an opportunity, getting the customer, making those sort of initial steps to become a customer, or perhaps this is for an existing customer, a new product line. But you create sort of the base with the customer, and the sales agreements, the sales plans, and so forth. And then once everything is ready and set up for the customer, and then of course the customer could theoretically request more different types of products as well. But at the end, for the customer view, they have an experience then enabled that they come in, everything is set up, their account is set up, the buyers are set up, they have their contract, their contracted products, and the price is available for them, and also the volumes agreed, and then based on that they begin to make adjustments and also place orders, and with that there's a lot of guidance for the buyers that, okay, what is available in the inventory and so forth, and in what price. And then once you have your orders placed, You have your shipments, perhaps you collaborate still with sales to adjust some detail. If you need support, you can create a support ticket specifically for that order or order line item, and so forth. Managing your account, perhaps you get some training, knowledge base, whatnot. So this becomes sort of a complete self-service capability that has, of course, one function of making an order, that is actually e-commerce is creating that functionality inside this holistic place. So instead of sort of having 2 or 3 separate places, you actually have one. And actually this whole step here where you begin to create your contract, so this also part of this communication could be on the self-service portal to understand the staging. Then of course, you know, it's all has to be highly connected, that you have all the information once the orders come in, where do they actually flow and how they are actually fulfilled. So a lot of detail to handle. Here's one interesting flavor from the one before. So you have that place where you have a store on Salesforce in this case. But actually in this case, when we have e-procurement, so the customer has their e-procurement systems where they make those purchase orders towards their suppliers. So in this method, the customer would actually begin the journey from their own system, and they get transferred into that actual storefront where they view their contracted products and prices, they put them in the cart, and then once they're ready, instead of checking them out, they actually make a transfer back to their own system where they go through their approval processes and whatnot. And when they're ready, the PO can be sent back that, hey, it's all good. Here we go, let's fulfill that. This has also additional flavor of demand and supply. So this is another element where if the customer demand and the warehouse information and whatnot is brought to that experience versus the supply information from the company, we can mix that into really valuable data and insights for both the company and the customer to collaborate upon. And this is just another example how that, remember that early image of simple commerce, that how it actually evolves into something more immersive. So another, well, that's an contracted volume-based buying with e-procurement. So just a mix of the one above. So just coming towards the end. So from Salesforce, just to give you a few pointers on the technology and how we think of it. Here are some things that we are working on with some of our customers. And in these, as you remember, I highlighted it early on, the composability, so that is really critical on each of the layers. But all of these, for example, are designed to run or are running on Salesforce technology. And in all of them, there's Commerce Cloud capabilities, bringing certain specific elements of handling the product assets, the way of buying, the way of checking out, the way of ordering, and so forth. And also for someone to manage the experience and connect the dots between really specific processes, because as said in the beginning, the surface is nothing if there's nothing beneath, and typically it's not only processes and data, but it's actually people behind. And then just to sort of look at the commerce portfolio from Salesforce, so there's a lot of capabilities and there's a lot of detail around these, but just want to highlight that there's that, of course, the commerce domain. And I'll put it really simply that the most of the things that the people in this audience perhaps they have their Salesforce, so Salesforce core. So there are products for the core that are really great for B2B and sort of also for complex B2C cases, and why not even straightforward and something easy to manage. But then there's also for B2C sort of enterprise level solutions. So just an example that we as Infosys and Fluido get to be part of is that if you go to adidas.com, so that is, for example, something done on Salesforce B2C Commerce Cloud. But then the marketplace I was mentioned briefly earlier. So if you have your multiple sellers available that you want to bring into the store, so perhaps you have your own products, but then your partner and seller network brings additional products available for your customers. So that's one simple use case for marketplace, and this is another one running directly on Salesforce Core and Experience Cloud. And especially it has a really neat data model to it. Salesforce also has payments, so Salesforce payments available for easier integrations if you have the payment options for your customers. And then if you want to have more complete order management directly on your customer data and really want to engage around this space with your customers, then Salesforce has capability to extend the B2B commerce with the order management capabilities. So you have your warehouses and inventory and order fulfillment details on Salesforce. And that doesn't close out that, of course, a lot of that is in ERP, but if you want to engage with your customers, then that is possible. But there you see a little bit of the Commerce Cloud capabilities, and Commerce Cloud, especially so the core is running on directly inside your Salesforce core platform. So you have all the capabilities that you would expect from Salesforce available for those solutions. Yeah, so really closing in, and let's get towards the questions in a sec. So just to recap, so I was talking about strategic e-commerce, so it has a lot more of building blocks than just your ability to browse products and make orders. So really think of it as holistically, but of course, as you remember, I said that it's good to start and put it in reasonable phases as well, so not to do everything at first, especially if you are just starting the journey. Balanced e-commerce, so not just tech, not just business, but it's all of these, the human, technology, and business. If you are able to really detail the information, research the information around this space, then you have the tools to capture this balance. Then finally, understand the full journey, what it actually means for the customers, your internal team, what is the role of e-commerce in that bigger picture, and how do they connect. It's more detailed than this, but just to give you a view of the role that this has to be understood in order to capture the true value of this capability. And of course, we are here to help, so we are involved in early on with our customers creating these concepts, big or small. It is really critical, and then especially for the enterprise customers, we have significant research capabilities within Infosys to really capture the details and capture the insights in order to create very detailed and meaningful strategy. But all the way to, of course, delivering. So we have a great team that know all the details of Salesforce capabilities in this space, and especially the best practices. But I stop now. It's surprising always. I had a target of 45 minutes, so now I have nice few minutes to hopefully capture a few of your thoughts or questions at this point.
Yes, so if you have questions in mind, feel free to write them down in the questions box. Antti, I have one for you here already. That's shortly, what is the role of CRM system in relation to e-commerce?
Yeah, good question. So, there's a way to do e-commerce, of course, sort of extremely decoupling way, sort of far away from your customer data as well, of course, connecting the dots. But the closer you are to your CRM, the processes, the logic, and the data around that, the better. And especially now going forward towards the future, where the customers really are demanding fantastic personal experiences around this space that are driving the steps that you need to take in the solution. So definitely those possibilities are closer for business to think of and then execute. But if you have extreme decoupling, it may be a little bit more challenging. But of course, that is something that Salesforce also supports. So Salesforce can be the back end for, and when the storefront is running outside of Salesforce. But yeah, closer the better.
Exactly. And next one, maybe a bit forward looking. What do you think is the next big thing in e-commerce?
Oh, yeah. I think anything going away from your traditional site or portal. I'm looking more into more immersive and on-site capabilities. So where your customers actually are, especially if you're in a business where the customer is actually on the move, or making decisions on the move, or when they are actually executing their process that typically you could actually help to solve. So e-commerce capabilities for when the customers are actually doing their processes rather than sort of returning on their desk and then making orders. So more immersive, definitely. And of course, we are looking forward to the VR and AR capabilities. And this is something that we are talking with our friends at Infosys because of their capabilities in that space already, that how far those could be taken and what are the really tangible elements that could be bringing, especially manufacturing industry, but why not also in B2C?
Thank you. And we have 1 minute left, and there's one more question. So pricing management. So you have customer prices, market prices, how to maintain those?
Oh, this is the big challenge and why sort of that technology and business have to really talk, and why not the human as well. So when it gets complex around the pricing, so of course for Salesforce commerce, the price is really critical to have close to the product. But we've also done projects where the customer is collecting their products, and then we call out for information from back end ERPs and whatnot, that what is the actual price for this. But quite often Salesforce has a lot of capabilities in that space, but I understand there's a lot of complexity regarding it. But I do want to bring forward that in e-commerce you have capabilities like best price and whatnot to really figure out what is the price after all the promotions and contracted pricing and the order volumes that they're selecting. But it is a big maze, so there's not a single source of truth for that, and it requires a lot of coffee, let's say, to figure that out.
And we are of course happy to help with those questions.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Our time is up. Thank you for joining us today. We have recorded this session, and we will share the recording with you afterwards. And hopefully you can join us soon again. So thank you very much, and have a very nice day. Thank you.